Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we start to get serious with the mini lathe. We last left off, I was talking about all the different measurements that we've taken across here. Here's a quick demonstration for you. I've just fixed a back plate onto the saddle here, and you can see we've got a nice little bit of movement just here. Moves nice and freely. Remember, I showed you that we're actually getting thicker as we move along. Show you how little it takes before we start to bind. Nice and easy. That's it. We're binding there. I can't physically push that up any further than there. Okay. So I'll just loosen that off a tad. See if that gets us any further. We'll just come up a bit. Okay. So now we're up to here. So it gets us from this spot into this spot. A little bit bindy still. Just knock that off a little bit more. Into that spot there. Nice and easy. Oh, it's starting to bind again. Get to here and it's binding again. So okay, so we're nice and tight here now because we're obviously binding. But look what happens when we come back to here. The amount of movement that we have there. So typically, it would mean setting this to a particular spot. I don't know, maybe somewhere in the middle. You have to force it up a bit and just put up with it being loose towards the back. So yeah, I just thought that would be a little bit of a demonstration just to visually show you exactly how this thickening rail on the back affects travel on the saddle. Same thing on the front, obviously, as we mentioned. It's fatter down this end, so it'll do the same thing. If there was a front plate on it, it would be, you know, you'd be struggling as you moved up this end for the same deal. So I've just got this cheap height gauge. It's not too bad. I've actually flattened the plastic. It's got a magnetic base on it, plastic magnetic base. I've actually flattened it off a bit because it was a little bit rocky. What it's showing me here is that there is a difference across here of at this point, and it will increase as it goes out further. But at this point, it's 0.63 of a millimeter. Just panning across there, 0.63 of a millimeter that needs to come out of this section here, which is, you know, in line with what I said in the last video. So what I am about to do is, I'll just pull this off. I'm just about to take this over to the kangaroo drill and slightly raise the roof of this V and widen it out slightly, just about 0.5 millimeter on each side, just to give me a bit of clearance so that when I start grinding in this section here on the lathe bed with the paper, it just gives me a little bit of room to move, so I'm not butting up against the corner of this roof, which will make it really hard to lap that out. As you can see here, this is the area that you can see there's a lot more gap under this section than there is under this section right here. This is what we have to bring down. It's only it actually looks worse, but going by the height indicator, it's only 0.6. So what I'm going to do is lap this out by fixing some emery cloth onto the rails of this V here, and you can see the roof of the 90-degree V. There's only about it's probably 0.5 millimeter. So what I'll do is I'll cut that about 0.5 millimeter deeper. Just to give me a bit of, and probably about 0.5 millimeter on each side wider. I'll just cut that out with an end mill, just so that it gives me a little bit of room, so that when I start lapping with the paper mounted on here, I'm not coming into that corner, which will really slow me down and bugger me up when I'm doing this. I'll just run it over onto the drill press. So I'll just throw this on there and just cut this groove a little bit deeper, and I'll bring it back and show you how that turned out. Alrighty. Hit the brake. Go and see how that looks. So there she is in all her glory. As you can see, This position here has just been opened up a bit slightly now. It's just to give us a little bit more clearance, so when these sides start to come off, that we're not going into that corner, which will just be absolutely terrible to try and do by lapping with the paper fixture here. So stage one, just slightly cut the roof out of that. If it needs any more, which I don't think it will, but if it does possibly need opening up any more, I'll just put it back on the mill drill and possibly widen it up maybe. I can't imagine it needing to go any deeper. Maybe widen it up a tad, but we'll see. Time to get us set up for some lapping. Okay, so here we go, we're all set up. I've got strips of 120 grit glued onto the front edge here. I have a strip of cardboard underneath about 6 layers of masking tape, which is sitting the saddle so that it's only very slightly, about 0.2 of a millimetre up on this edge. So we're getting as even a cut as possible, and as I go down, I'll adjust this and probably replace this with some finer tape, but I'll just attempt to see how much of a cut I get by doing this, how hard it is, and how it's starting to work. So let's see what happens, eh? Oh, by the way, I've also, not sure if you can see here, I'll just tilt the camera down. I've got a woodworking vise here that I've restored with aluminium plates on it. I find it really, really handy because it's flush with the top of the bench, and it's quite a good working height. I find I use it an awful lot, and I've just dropped a 10mm bolt. As you can see, I've roughed out these the plates that I'm going to use to mount the lathe when I do fix it to the bench. They're roughed out to give me a little bit more stability during this process, and I've dropped a 10mm bolt down through the hole on the side and clamped it in the vise, so the lathe bed can't actually move. It's fixed really well, so I won't be fighting it as I'm trying to stroke backwards and forwards in the lapping process. So hopefully we should be all good. Let's see what happens, eh? So you can see there, even after a few short strokes, it's already started to clean that line right up. Exactly how much is taken off, I guess we're yet to be seen. I might start using a bit of lubricant, maybe spray some WD-40 on it just to clean the paper up a bit as I go. Wow. As you can see, that kind of sucks. The WD-40 is working really well to help it cut, but it's dissolved the glue. So that is a problem. What will we do now? Man, that improves it so much. So where I left off with the saddle, I had her all set up like this, and I was madly grinding away, backwards and forwards, trying to knock this down, like this. I went at it with the setup that you saw there earlier for probably about 4 hours, and I was absolutely knackered. In that 4 hours, I managed to get it down on this side by about 0.1 of a millimetre, and I thought there's got to be a better way. So that's when I decided to bite the bullet. This is just a cheap carbide 12mm end mill. That's the fella right there. It's basically a chamfer mill. It's really designed for taking the corners off things, as in, you know, running along edges and putting chamfers, but it's also the perfect shape, being 90 degrees for cutting something like this. On the previous video, when I did a little bit of work on the original tailstock foot plate, I used a 90 degree countersinking bit, which was a very cheap tool. For the little bit of work that I did on the tailstock foot plate, it did the job, but I wasn't prepared to attack something like the saddle with that without buying a decent end mill to do it with. This was only 20 bucks Australian or something, so probably about $3 US. It did a great job. I just did a few passes on this. You just saw the kangaroo mill in action, and the reason I didn't start straight at this was because firstly I didn't have this, and the setup time that it takes to actually get the kangaroo mill running with any sort of accuracy is quite a lot. And what pushed me to do it was I thought, well, if I take the time to set the drill up so I can do some accurate milling with it, buy a bit, I can kill two birds with one stone and make a new foot plate for the tailstock, which in my opinion it's in dire need of. So yeah, after setting it up, I actually used the tailstock foot plate as the test to get the accuracy in check and make sure that I was running parallel and square and the depth of cuts were even as it came through and all that sort of stuff before I got to the point of even attempting the saddle, because for one, you know, I can make a new one of these, but I can't make a new one of these, so if I buggered it up, I'd be screwed. That's straight off the drill mill. I'm going to actually clean that up a bit. I'm going to put some fine paper on this front rail of the lathe bed and lap it in again, but it's about 0.03, I think, high still on this side, which is stuff all, and I left that on there for the sole purpose of lapping it in. But at least now it's running almost perfectly flat at this point with the top of the lathe bed. I also had to trim the bottom of this edge down because it came down so far here. It ended up that this front here was actually hanging underneath that front rail on the lathe bed there, which is a problem because if it's short you can shim it, but if it's long you've got to mill a step into the front plate so that the inside comes up higher than this outside edge is here. And I've actually got a modification plan to make a new piece for this, a new front plate here that actually goes around and comes up in behind the piece on the front there. So I wanted to get that done at the same time while I had the drill trammed in. I did all the cuts that I needed to do to get everything into check with this, and to also make this piece to the point where it's where I want it, which is great. So those two pieces, other than I will probably, as I say, I'll lap this in just a tad, and I'll do the same thing with this new tailstock foot plate. Yeah, so I might get at that now. Alrighty. Which it is looking pretty bloody good, I must say. She's starting to look really good. Not sure if you can see here, but they're very light milling marks still present there. Pretty much gone here. We'll take those out, we'll get rid of that, get it really nice and smooth. In the V's looking really good now, just a couple of light marks, but it's looking really nice. So yeah, I'll check it with a height gauge when I'm finished, but it was almost dead on when I started, so I'm assuming that it's going to be pretty much dead nuts and we won't have to worry about it. The main thing now is just starting to lap it all smooth. But time to carry on. We're not there yet. Once everything is smooth and parallel, I'll more than likely hit it with some lapping paste and lap the surfaces together. For obvious reasons, you can't use lapping paste at a time like this. Because lapping paste will do both surfaces at once. The problem with using paste and not using a one-sided surface like gluing paper down is that the paste will evenly abrade both surfaces. So if they're not completely flat to begin with, there's no saying that the lumpy surface is going to be made flat by the flat surface. There's a good chance that you'll just even them out and end up with two lumpy surfaces. So lapping paste is really good for getting things really nice and neatly together. So at least doing it this way. If you have a known flat surface like the top of the lathe bed, we're just reproducing that on the underside of whatever's touching it. I'm yet to attack the underside of the ways because I'm scared. There's a shitload of work in doing that, but at least at this point, I think I've achieved quite a lot. This is getting really good. It was worth flashing out and buying a decent cutter and spending the time to set up the kangaroo drill to do all this with. And yeah, bottom line is, at least it's allowed me to make a new foot plate for the tailstock, and you can see the difference. It's, you know, there's quite a size variation. This one allows me to create a new lock. This is a locking plate that mounts up underneath it. Those bolts go through those two positions there. I'll do an in-depth video on this whole piece here because there's quite a lot involved in it, and it turned out really well. It's a really nice piece now. The saddle has a similar locking piece to this that I've made up for it. So yeah, I'll do a video on those on their own. But carry on. I might have another crack with some WD-40, just because the last time it came apart I had strips stuck on the side. It was quite easy for the WD-40 to get down between it. At this point, it may not get there. If it lifts it off, they really need replacing anyway, so I guess we'll see. This should certainly speed this up though. Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Hopefully they won't come off and I'll be good. It's starting to lift, but it's not coming off yet. Fortunately, you can see these ends here, it's just lifting, but I'll stay and put for now. It's the main thing. That is looking pretty damn good. So, not too bad at all at this point. Like I say, there'll probably be a little bit more of a tune-up later on. But, so far, so good. I'll just check it with the height gauge. Clean all this mess up. As you can see, I've lost the strip off here from using the WD-40 on it. This one's just about to come off, but it did allow me to do a little bit more cutting. Yeah, I'll clean it all up, and I think I'll check it all the height gauge and see how it worked out. And WD-40 certainly breaks down that glue. Trying to get it off with wax and grease remover before, and you don't want to come off, but WD-40, ooh la la, it takes it straight off. And it doesn't affect my nice new paint. The moment of truth is upon us. The previous height measurements before starting this ordeal was around about where I've got the marker set on the dial indicator, which was almost 7/10 of a millimetre. So let's see how we go. I'll just sweep up this edge, up this milled surface here, which is how I was doing it before. We'll see what we've got. Oh, oh, oh. Three 1/100ths of a millimetre. I consider that to be pretty damn good. 3 1/100ths. Maybe 3.5 1/100ths. We're a bit over the zero. Mate. Pretty happy with that. I don't think you can complain too much about that. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with that, I must admit. So that brings to an end this section of work on the saddle. It now puts us in a position with the saddle itself being completely parallel to the top of the lathe bed. We can now start lapping the ways. At least now when we do lap the ways, we know that the face that we will be creating on the underside of the ways will now be parallel to the top, rather than following the same line as the top of the saddle, which when we started wasn't parallel to the top of the bed. So yeah, so that's excellent. It means that we can now move on and progress into that area there, which does scare me a bit because I know how much work it's going to be. But for the next video, I think I might go back over the revisions to the tailstock that I've done, to the tailstock footplate and a couple of other things. So thanks for watching.